And it is a beautiful, beautiful morning all across the nation, all across the world, all across the cosmos, because we have deemed it necessary to have a beautiful day. And we have that power to make that manifest. How about that? For an
Sounds
opening
good.
warm-up thought. Anyway, I've got Dr. Devan, or Reverend Devan, Doc, Dr. Devan, that works too.
It's honorary, at least. Doctor.
Yes, and we've got Mr. Barret Dean, and then myself, and we are going to review a movie, whether you like it or not. And the movie for today is The Lion King, a Disney movie that, interestingly enough, wasn't tied into the Pixar
Before the
processing.
time.
Yeah, and I like the Pixar movies. I think, really give you that little extra pop. So this one is kind of old school. It's like watching, Casablanca from the Disney studio productions. But it is an interesting movie. It has a lot of very worldly ideas embedded in it, which of course would make sense. We're talking about, organization that's devoted to giving pleasure to, our worldly expectations. And this is a good one along that line because, as the Course in Miracles tells us, we are the hero of our individual journeys through this realm of space and time. And we've got heroes all over the place getting blunted in this movie as they run into reality repeatedly. So I'll let you guys take it off as far as what it was that you found of depth and value, looking at it through the lens of A Course in Miracles. I myself enjoyed it, but I didn't see it as being hugely profound. Or biggerly profound, I think is probably what I actually meant.
Yeah, it's definitely not outwardly, openly profound. It's not something that is no, it's not like The Matrix where it's just blowing apart your mind, but it's more symbolic as far as how I see it. And the circle of life there. And to think of it as symbolic, you're able to kind of translate it a little differently. And as far as, even just like the world, using the symbols of the world for this healing process, you have to look at it in a different language, like a different way with the eyes of the spirit. It's like a translation. And I think it's required to look at this as somewhat of a lesson and able to teach you of reality. And kind of the main idea of it for me was this idea that we believe that we usurp the power of God and that we have literally killed God, and that we're off in a place where we have to eat grubs and we're just like, yeah, man, it's okay, it's a kuna matata, right? Yeah. Just relax. It's all good. Just meditate, right? Okay.
Yeah. No, I like that metaphor because I was getting that a lot too. I think a lot of people know the basic story. Simba the son goes off into the desert and then eventually finds a way to make it out in the far wilderness. Because he thinks he killed his father. And what is this but a symbol of what we all we've done, right? Again, the Course teaches us that our deepest problem is a belief in the separation. And because we believe we exist independently, that in itself is basically a statement that we killed God.
Yeah.
And it's not really true, just like it wasn't really true even in the movie, but it's what we believe, just like that's what Simba was believing. He believed it was his fault. So you could say that this is a beautiful symbol of the prodigal son story. which is Jesus's explanation of how we seem to get into this world of pain and suffering. And I think there are a lot of parallels that, again, we can use as a part of our healing and our awakening, to see ourselves as Simba, as you were saying, Chris, that we believe we are the hero of the dream, the beautiful section in the Course. But that section is also kind of instructive because it says that the hero is really not what we are, right? We think we are that. We think we are an individual self. But really, ultimately, we need to awaken from the idea that we've ever been separate. And that's where we come into our state of truth.
And it's interesting with the way that, the movie plays out. We have an evil uncle who is kind of the dark side of the Force, I guess you could say, in the Star Wars episodes. It's all the same imagery, and it's that idea of this dark presence that is inspiring us to act out, to do things that are inappropriate. And I find it fascinating that the connection here is, by lineage. It's the Lion King and his brother are the two polarities. And so we see this alter ego come up, the imagery of Lucifer, the fallen angel, who stimulates all kinds of conundrums. He masterminds all these different things. And as a result of it, he ends up diminishing himself instead of rising to a higher level. And I think that really is what we see in this material world over and over and over again, is that the more we struggle to climb to the top of the hill and be, the supreme ego, the ruling ego of all the other egos, the more we become a buffoon. And we're watching this acted out on a national level here in the United States right now.
Buffoon.
Before,
I love that, because I'm trying to kind of pinpoint where does and it kind of relies on Simba, a star, where does he start to see this separation? And as much as and where does that kind of want to start? And as much as I want to say, it starts at this time or that time, it was the very beginning of the movie. It was before the movie even began, that once you get into it, you start seeing all these animals and this beautiful music about the circle of life and how great it is, and this specialness of this. We had a son, and the shaman comes in, and all this good stuff, and it's as much as I want to say, it seems like there's a bunch of different imagery, but as it talks about it, it's really all needs each other, and that king isn't anything special. He's more something that organizes it and lets it follow its own course, kind of an idea. And as far as that's what I hear, what's his name? What's the king's name?
Mufasa.
Mufasa, exactly.
Say it again.
Mufasa. And what he was talking about, the circle of life, and that we all kind of, when we die, we become grass and all this stuff, and simple way of understanding it. But even in that sense of, the Mufasa being kind of this glorious good king kind of an idea, and then Scar being this kind of negative idea. Even born, he was born without muscle, but he says he has smarts, and Mufasa is the strong one. And then there's Simba, just newly into this kind of, in this opportunity to make this decision and kind of see between them, who's better. And he already thinks he's separate from it. Like, I'm going to become king. I'm going to become into this position. I'm going to, instead of recognizing that even in the state of becoming, just like a holy relationship, it is what it is going to become already. It's destined, and so it is. And so technically, in the whole situation, as much as he's going through a growing path, he is the king already. And it's more of he's learning from both the good side and the bad side, and kind of taking it in. What am I going to believe? What am I going to see? And what am I going to use as the king when I am the king, when I'm in the position where all the separate ones recognize I am the king. And it really, as far as even when he's out in the wilderness, even when it's the Kuna Matata time, even when all this stuff is sleeping in the jungle, he's still the king the entire time. But and to kind of reference to the separation idea, that as far as he's the star, he's kind of the center focus, but the entire dream being two-dimensional, which is beautiful for this, it's much easier to see that, even though colors just differ around to discern different objects and stuff, it's just one movie screen, and it's just has this one thing happening, and it sure depicts by his focus. And we actually think this lion is engaging with other animals and all this stuff, and we actually think that it's, they have opinions, and he actually feels this way, and we're talking about it like this. He actually, it represents this relation that we have, and we feel it. So our relating to the story is actually to what we are feeling of this separation, this war in heaven, as it's referred to, in this kingdom of heaven, in the occurrence of this. And so even as we are off in this separation, or thinking that we're coming back home or anything, we're still in the position of the king. And it might seem like the becoming of the king or whatever, but we're still in the authority of our reality. And that's not to say our separate self as the hero of the dream, but the reality of what is awakening.
Yeah. I kind of was, what's the word for it, smitten with the idea that Mufasa, after he has left his lion body behind,
after he left the lion,
yes,
lion there,
and he was a lion in the desert. But anyway, it was interesting how he manifests for Simba, and comes out of the heavens, as it were, the night sky. And to me, that was taking on a lot of different avenues, but Mufasa was, in a sense, that calling that we receive from God via the Holy Spirit, that we need to go back and reclaim the kingdom, rather than continue to live the life of struggle and victimhood. So that was one of the high points in the movie for me. I thought that one really, was a nice way to present that awareness to children who are, who the movie was targeted for, with the idea that the body is not the content of our life. It is merely the vehicle that we use temporarily while we're on this level of consciousness.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I really like that too. That whole scene with Rafiki in the middle of the movie was just really great, and I think Rafiki, being the sort of shaman baboon, that he represented the Holy Spirit, right? And the way that he got Simba's attention when Simba was like, well, am I missing something here? Is there more than the life I've been living? And Rafiki basically says, yeah. And he says, Simba breaks the news to him. Oh, well, I'm sorry to tell you, but my father's dead. And Rafiki says, no, he's not. He's alive, and I'll show him to you. It's just such a great symbol, because that's what the Holy Spirit is saying to us. We're saying, oh, no, God's dead. And, I'm bereft, I'm alone. And the Spirit's like, no, God is not dead. God is ever present in you. Here, come, let me show you. And then this beautiful scene in the movie where all of a sudden Simba is following Spirit, right? Simba is following Rafiki. And where does Rafiki lead him? He leads him through the forest, and he has to go up and over, and he has to go through the branches. He's got to go through the dark and some hard spots that he really has to squeeze through. Well, what is that but our journey, right? As we start listening to Spirit within, we go through all these things, right? We go through all these challenges and these problems, these pains. And then what do we see? Well, we see our own reflection. We think we're going to something else. But what does Rafiki show him? That what he's been looking for is within himself. I mean, this is like such a beautiful message.
Yeah.
And then, of course, followed up by the even a more clear message where Mufasa shows up in the clouds and basically reminds them, you have to come back to yourself. You've lost sight of who you are, and it's time for you to rediscover your truth. So I agree that's sort of that scene in the middle of the movie was really the most beautiful part of the movie for me too.
Yeah, I really love that part. Yeah, the scene coming to the reflection of yourself, and it's like, what are you talking about? That's just me. And it kind of opens up. No, I've been with you the whole time, really. And as I've always been watching. I've always been here. It seems like it's separate distance, but it was through the revelation of that reflection of himself, which is beautiful. And it's like maturity, and as far as the awakening process and in this separation and in any form, it seems to come by surprise. We get into that circumstance we weren't expecting. We thought we were receiving a gift from our uncle, right? And he just told us to sit here, stay here. And next thing we know, it's leading to our father's death and all this stuff. We were anticipating something great, something more. And the only way to have more than perfection was this idea of separation. And so it did lead down this whole road of now death is possible. Even when his father was telling him about death and telling him how he would leave someday, and that he would have to stand up maybe earlier than he was expecting, ready for it and everything. It didn't register with Simba, and he had this innocence. It wasn't about death. It didn't register. It didn't make any sense. He's like, oh yeah, sure. And then when it happened, he lost that innocence. So now, this whole thing is a little different than expected. Bravery requires something different now. I mean, I really could die even as my father died. And so as we were just trusting our uncle and this kind of negative side, evil side person, it took us down a road that, we just wanted more. We just wanted this gift. And we just didn't realize that it meant completely changing our world, completely changing our universe and what we were going to experience. And that it was going to require a lot of different thinking and this maturity that we just didn't expect.
Well, and it also, for children who have to confront the loss of a parent, I think this is a wonderful movie because it helps us to recognize that that person is still with you, and that person is still a part of your being, even though the physical body may be gone. In 1953, I lost my father, and he died the day after his birthday. And I remember going to the wake and looking at the coffin and looking at the body there, and it didn't even affect me. It was like, oh yeah, that's his body. But I still had that ongoing communication. I still had that ongoing presence with him. So everybody around me was hysterical and crying and weeping, and my grandmother was a complete basket case. And, it was a very somber experience, and in many ways a hideous experience. But for me, I intuitively already was aware of the fact that the body was not the person. The body was just the shell. But I think for young kids who are going through that kind of a trauma, this is a great movie because it helps them realize that the person they love, the person that they relate to as a parent, is still with them, although not in physical form. So that's, I think, is a great lesson that we pick up from the movie, and you can offer that to people around you as a reassurance that that there is no end to life. There may be an end to bodies, but there is no end to life.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. That is good. That is good. And it actually kind of fits with something you were saying a little bit ago, Devin, where you're talking about how, the whole movie is 2D, right? I mean, well, all movies are, right? Even the movies that, unless it's a 3D movie, I guess, but almost all of them, even the ones that are filmed with people, the standard movie, it's a 2D image, right? It's not a real person there. It's just an image. And it reminds me of this experience I had. I was driving in California, and as I was driving down the highway, all of a sudden everything I was seeing switched to look like a cut paper animation. So like the road was made out of paper, the hills were made out of paper, the sky was made out of paper. It was all moving, like I was still driving down the road, but it was all paper. And along with this vision, this perception, I knew none of it was real, that I was making all of it up. And I knew the main emotion I had in that moment was like freedom. I was like, oh, all the things I worry about, I don't have to worry about them at all because they're all made up. I was just so relieved and so happy. And the experience just lasted a few minutes. But the takeaway from it has been with me since then, and it's profound, right? That all of this is made up, just like the movie we watched was made up. Even this world that we seem to be seeing in this moment is made up too, and we made it all up. Well, why did we do that, right? We must have had a good reason. Well, it's the same story we're talking about. We listened to our wrong uncle, Scar, who we could call the ego, and ego said you have to run away into a world of form, and we decided to go along. But we didn't really have to, and now, just like in the movie, we're coming to ourselves, right? We're seeing that the divine is within us, like Simba did in that reflection and in that message from his father. What does Simba do when he gets the message? He starts running home, right? He's like, I'm going back. And he leaves right then. And it's also a beautiful symbol of our journey, right? That we're going back home. We kind of, once Rafiki kind of hit him in the head with that stick, it sort of knocked some sense into him, right? As he said. And then in our way, we all get hit in our head with some sort of stick in our life. And then we realize, what I really want is I just want to know my truth. And my truth is perfect love. So I'm going for it. But it's still a journey, right? Even once we have that dedication, that desire, that willingness, we still have to go through the steps. We still have to face Scar like he did in the end. We have to face our ego and realize we didn't have to, we didn't have to be as worried about it as we thought we did. So, yeah,
that's good. I want to get into the Kuna Matata. Out there, he's having a nice life. I don't know why this alarm's going off now. Yeah, it's a nice life, just enjoying it, growing old, eating grubs, and his friend, which is one of the smallest animals in there, and then one of the, well, he is a pig, I guess, but one of the decent sized animals. Anyway, just enjoying the love, it's all about love, man. It's just letting it go, just relaxing, and it's beautiful. And it wasn't really till, like, he thought it was perfect until someone showed up, which happened to be his best friend, that recognized him, and he recognized her. And it was kind of the sense of the beginning of the holy relationship in a way. That they, as much as they had this special thing going on, whoa, our group's down to 2, our trio's down to 2. I love that song. Love is in the air. Oh. I don't even remember it, but I like it anyway. And it really opens up this whole thing that they start knowing each other, recognizing each other from a whole nother lifetime, it seems like, and it just opens up this touching areas and boundaries that weren't able to be touched. And they're like, what, you're the king, what are you talking about? It begins this revelation, exposing of what he truly is to the people that he thought it was never important to say, never important to bring up, because he thought it was not possible, not happening anymore. So, as far as, and then his relationship, whatever it brings, and I wish I watched it last night, because I actually watched it like a couple weeks ago, but it opens up that opportunity of becoming that holy relationship and starting to remember and to see. And as much as it seems to be about this special thing going on between them, and it opens up his eyes to like, oh yeah, maybe, it's, maybe I should be, maybe, but I can't, I can't. And then it led into that Rafiki recognizing and knowing that he's still alive and all that good stuff, which he could just smell in the air. That was pretty cool. Like, Simba.
Well, that is the way that the animal kingdom works. I watch Loki, our German Shepherd, and his sensitivity to smell is astonishing. We throw him out in the backyard and we have people come over, and he will get right down to the edge of the door, and he's sniffing constantly and identifying all these different people that are in the house that he can't see. So I think it opens us up to that recognition that in truth, we have, hypersensitivity, because we are so intimately joined with one another and with all of life that it's all inside us. We can recognize it from within. And out picturing it, we see it represented as sight and smell and touch and all those other sensory experiences we've come to rely on. But at the end of the movie, we see Scar come to his bloody end in a rather grotesque fashion. And I find that interesting too, because I think that they were relying on that idea that life has an element of revenge associated with it, regardless of what's going on. You're going to get your just dues at the end, and that is very much the ego's, story over and over again, is if you go out there and do bad things in the world, you're going to ultimately have a bad end. And while it is very typical of our ego journey through space and time, I think it's something that we have to be alert to and not hope for revenge on all of the bad guys in this world, because in truth, we have scripted the roles that they are playing. We wrote the dialogue. So when somebody that you find offensive says something that you find offensive, you need to take 2 steps back and breathe deeply, because you participated, you wrote that script so that you could be offended by the evil that lurks around us. So the message was very clear with Scar's ending, but the truth is that none of us actually ever did anything wrong, so there's no sin to be paid for. And I think that if you're communicating with children, I think you have to point that out to them. That's one of the points in this movie that could impress people in the wrong way.
Yeah, I agree. And the movie sort of ends on that note, which is the standard typical note. The bad guy gets his due, he dies, and everyone else, all the good guys are happy. Yay! which is kind of silly, and but it's the standard kind of movie formula. You know, you could even say,
Sometimes.
yeah, like, you know, they even end with a happy ending, right? Oh, well, they had a new baby and they're happy. Well, how does the movie start? The movie starts like that, right? So the movie is
The
kind of painful.
circle of life.
Well, it just means more pain. Is Simba's kid going to have to go through all kinds of awful things too? I mean, maybe, right? I mean, in this physical world, but they leave you on a happy note, and it has this sort of happily ever after idea, which is what the ego wants us to believe, right? If we just get the world to look the way we want it to, then everything will be happy here. But, you know, in all the fairy tales, you know, they end with the words, and they lived happily ever after. Well, no, they didn't, you know, they really didn't. It never happens that way. That's just a little lie that they put in at the end. But I also wanted to touch on the Hakuna Matata thing, right? You were singing that song, which is so great, classic, probably one of the best known songs from the movie. And it's interesting because it gets shown in sort of a few different ways, right? I mean, at first they say, hey, let go of your troubles, buddy. Hakuna Matata, you know, let it all go. But then it's sort of, you know, he tries to adopt the attitude, but what is he really doing? Well, he's just suppressing his pains and his sorrows. He's sort of layering it, you know, Hakuna, everything's fine, Hakuna Matata, no worries, on top of his genuine problem. So then, you know, she comes, Nala, his girlfriend, and sort of says, you know, says, hey, why don't you be the king? We need your help. And he says, well, Hakuna Matata, right? No worries. So then it sort of gets this tinge of like, oh, I'm denying or negating my real problems, and I'm just sort of going la la la. I don't hear these problems. And so by the end of the movie, Hakuna Matata sort of has a bad feeling to it, right? But there's a deeper way of looking at this, right? And it's the teaching of the Course, that when we come to see the emptiness of everything here in the world of form, that we can go through the world with absolutely no worries and no concerns, because we know there is no cause for concern. And this isn't a way of denying the pain or the suffering that happens here, or pretending at least that it's not unfolding. It's a way of actually seeing through it, and seeing that at the very core of it, there is no power that has to affect me. And so it's a very different way of kind of using that same concept, but in a way that resonates in truth, rather than as just a cover over the fear.
Yeah, and you know, I kind of see it as also kind of accepting your role in the script, as far as, instead of just suppressing it or avoiding it, you know, I actually related to the movie Moana, but in a fashion which is just another beautiful movie about calling, and she has inspiration to leave opposed to leaving out of guilt, what seems to be her journey. And in the same sense, you know, what are we called to do? I mean, even if he didn't have that guilty experience and think that he should leave because he was guilty of something, I'm sure there would have been some sort of reason developed to leave anyway. And it could have been a more positive fashion, a positive way, because it was kind of in the script, kind of a reason, something to happen for him to learn that wasn't available there, in just accepting his role in the kingdom and everything. And that the way of guilt, even though it's seen as negative, which is very symbolic, I feel like there would have been some sort of education happening anyway. It could have been a little more gentle, a little easier. Maybe it didn't have to do with murder and all this stuff. But that even in the sense of, say, the father died of old age, then you know, he would have just some reason couldn't handle it and felt like he had to get out of there and had to go and learn Kuna Matata anyway, and kind of an idea like it's funny that we think we can get out of the script in any sort of fashion, but it's like it's going to happen anyway, even if we've deemed it as a negative fashion or a positive fashion. It really doesn't matter how it gets us to do it, gets the motivation to happen, that there is a reason in our, you know, and this is contradictory to most people teaching of A Course in Miracles, but there is a reason in which we are often doing this separation thing, even if it is simply experiencing something we never want to experience again. And we have eternity to to question, are we going to sit there on our throne and wonder, what is it like over there where the sun doesn't shine constantly? Or are we going to go over there and find out and then come back and be like, yeah, I don't care about that place. I want to stay over here, and then never wonder about it again. And so, there's many different ways of interpreting it. But as far as kind of the unfolding of the script is when he does finally face it, he accepts his role in the kingdom. And I see the ending of the movie kind of about transcending the movie itself, and that it's actually about coming home into your position of not only the Son of God, but that role and that relationship between being one with God. And so it's that happily ever after is, I'm no longer in the nightmare of a dream of separation, and I've accepted my reality and all this stuff. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
that scenario where he is kind of escorted out of his rightful place in the kingdom is another brilliant example of biblical testimony or biblical dialogue, because we have Adam and Eve being thrown out of the garden, and we have seen that drama being played out in so many different ways because of so many different diasporias. The Jews being driven out of Israel, the Native Americans being, moved off their land, the Irish being persecuted. It just goes on and on and on. So that whole concept of God's wrath and being driven out of our natural home, I think, is definitely reinforced in this movie. That's an idea that we see in all different levels of society, but that fizzles out as soon as you begin to realize that you wrote the script, because in recognizing that, you realize that you are not a victim of the world that you are experiencing, and you are the creator of that world. So you definitely want to tread lightly in addressing those kinds of ideas to groups of Holocaust survivors and to tribes across the country, and to basically to large segments of humanity throughout the world, because God never opened the door and said, get the hell out. We were the ones who slithered out on our own, and now we're beginning to wake up to the realization that God wants us back. There was never a moment when God did not want us back. So that's the extra element of motivation to get ourselves back on track.
Amen.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. I like that. And I like what you were saying too, Devin, about looking at sort of like the spiritual message of the movie, even more so than maybe the way that it ended on the physical, that really it was about awakening. And I think if we look at the film through that lens too, it's like, yeah, that's very powerful, because it means that there really was no victim. It means this whole journey, as the Course even teaches us, our journey back is an illusion as well, but it's an illusion that ends the illusion. And if we use it for that purpose, then yeah, we might still appear to be in the body for a while, and it might still, look like we're going through dualistic things, ups and downs, but we're going to know that none of that is real. And we're going to be in a state of awakening and of joy. And yeah, I don't know if Simba was really there, or if that was really the point that the people writing the movie had to it. But I think if we look at it through that lens, I think it does sort of pack more of a powerful punch.
Yeah.
The other thing I find kind of humorous in the whole thing was that there is that one scene where that awesome song from way back in the 1930s, I think was when it was written, "The Lion Sleeps Tonight." That one comes up for me as, you know, a big high point, because when I was graduating from high school, when I was a high schooler, that song had hit the charts, and it was an absolute joy to go out and have a couple of Coors beers and sing along with "The Lion Sleeps Tonight." But it was interesting that the family of the man who wrote the song sued Disney and walked away with a big pocket full of cash as a result of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised
wow.
that Disney didn't get license for that
Yeah.
song before they put it in the movie.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Huh.
That's funny.
Yeah. Well, good for him.
A lot of things I'm not getting royalty for here. All these people putting music in my life.
Yeah, but you have your perks, Devin. I mean, you undoubtedly have all these people showing up on your doorstep with alms that they present to you. You know, you've probably got hot meals on wheels stopping by randomly to enhance your life experience.
Not quite that to that extent, but yeah, I got my little servants.
Is that what you call your kids?
Go get my shoes. Go get my shoes.
Yes.
Get daddy's shoes. Come on.
So yeah, the next evolution is droids. We'll be able to save our children that unpleasantness if we invent droids and have them doing all that fetching and catering and etc.
Right,
That brings up a movie, Wall-E. Get into children's movies. How it's like leads into the laziness of humankind, and yeah, even the losing of bones and evolution, atrophy. Anyway.
Yeah, that was a good one.
As far as overall, you know, I really enjoy the movie. I was one of those kids I think this movie was made for, and it's inspiring, but it does, and it's inspiring on several different levels. As far as even on that physical level, just to, you know, have some sort of spirituality in your life, just to, yeah, life goes on. You know, even the actors continued after this movie. Even the actor of Mufasa still lives on. You know, it's like there's still something in him that's still going, and you know, just anyway, in just to see it again in new eyes with the definitions of the Course in Miracles and the teachings from your own inner guidance and your own Rafiki, and it's beautiful, and I find it very inspiring. I highly recommend it to go back and see it again as an adult if you haven't yet. So.
Yeah, I thought it was a great movie. I liked the cast. I thought that, you know, James Earl Jones was brilliant as the father lion, the father of the pride, and Matthew Broderick was Simba. Jeremy Irons was over the top as Scar. I mean, he was just brilliant. So
he plays a lot of villains.
Yes, and he definitely has refined that skill. But overall, I think it's a great movie, and I do think it's something that you need to be conscious of when you share it with your children, to give them a little bit of an extra handle on some of the characters, some of the twists in the plot. I wouldn't just, you know, plop kids down on a couch and pop in the movie and walk away. I think you need to be able to talk to children about the things that are happening in the movie so that they get a little bit more insight.
Beautiful. Yeah, I give it a big thumbs up. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite early Disney animations from when I was growing up, and I even like, you know, how at this turning point, Simba kind of goes off and on his quest to return home. But what happens? Well, all of his friends come with him, and really, what is it? It's a joining. There's a joining at the end of the movie for him to accomplish, returning to being the king, claiming that for himself. And I think all of our symbols are like that, and maybe even this movie talk that we're doing is a symbol of that, right? Us joining together on our journey back home. And I think that's a beautiful analogy. And I think, again, I don't know if all of it fits with the Course theology, but I think there's enough really beautiful messages here that everyone who watches it can get a lot out of it. So yeah, big thumbs up.
You mentioned some of the actors there as Matthew Broderick playing Simba. He was the adult Simba. I remember watching the Toolman show, and I remember when this started, and I found out Jonathan Taylor Thomas was being the young Simba. Nice. And it was like the first time I realized, there's real people behind these cartoons. I remember that I was about like 9 years old, and it was interesting. I was like, now I can't see Simba for who he really is. I keep seeing this guy in this show, this brat teenager.
Yes, well, the brutal truth will always reveal itself at the end of the movie.
That's true. Yeah.
Okay. Well, everybody, it was a beautiful morning, great discussion, and we'll have to have a conclave to figure out what our next movie is going to be.
Yeah. Everyone, stay tuned. We'll be announcing what that is, and love to have you watching our future videos.
And I might add, if you have any ideas you want us to get into, I'm sure you can set in the comments and give us a list of movies. I'm sure we already have in our minds, but your help to decide would be great.
Awesome. All right.
There we go.